Well, I've been using this book by Lynn Twist called The Soul of Money to tell you about and to talk about some of the ideas that I've been presenting in this series about money. And you'll notice that the first Sunday, really all I talked about was suspending, or most of the thing that I asked you to do was to suspend your belief about what you think about money. Like, just believe everything as it is and rest your weary mind about it. Because sometimes that first feeling when people talk about money, especially in what seems like a church environment, is like, oh no, here we go. What they're going to ask me about money. I said, well, let's just leave everything for now. Let's just leave it as it is, rest our weary minds, and make some room for something else. And the next two ideas I talked about were these ideas of, inspired by this book, were these ideas of scarcity and the idea of enough. And I said, you know, those two ideas are really just mindsets. There's a mindset of scarcity that is reinforced by the idea that there's not enough, that more is better, and that's just the way it is. And we're in that mindset of scarcity, we're in the mindset of fear. And we try to hold on to what we have because we're afraid there's not enough and we need to gather it all toward us. But when I talk about the mindset of enough, really is the birthplace of possibilities. It really opens up in us another possibility because we align ourselves with the truth, which is what is out here is not what prosperity is about. It comes from within. It is in the wealth of ideas and the wealth of possibilities from within. And when we're in that mindset, boy, things are a lot different. We even see the world differently. We're in that mindset. Last week I talked more about money itself because that's what we needed to understand first is that. And last week I gave you the story of Gertrude, those of you who were here. And we talked about putting the stamp of our soul on money, the circulation of money in our lives, whether we're receiving it, whether we're giving it, or whether we're using it. To remember to put the stamp of our soul, and the stamp of our soul comes from the place of integrity and generosity and possibility. And I invited you to think about money in your life as if it was water flowing through and you simply managed the flow of money in your life. Trusting that there was always abundance. Trusting that the source of money really isn't your job. I didn't mention that last week, but I gave you some examples of Renee and I in our life about honoring that flow, because it flows through our life. And when we get stuck, if we dam it up, that's when we come from the scarcity thinking, because we think we have to have more. We think we have to keep it for ourselves, and we dam up that flow. But when we shift from this mindset of scarcity into this mindset of enough, and we realize that money flows, we tend to loosen up a little bit, don't we? I hope you did this past week. It's like, oh, you loosen your grip a little bit. You're like, okay, this is all right. I can just relax a little bit into it. Water flows, money flows in my life. It's okay. There's enough. I'll have enough. That mindset of that, and we look at life differently. And I told you the story last week of the CEO that gave Lynn Twist. She has a volunteer organization she works for called the Hunger Project. And this man had given her, the CEO had given her this $50,000 check. But he was giving it to her with the energy of guilt because his organization had been caught doing something untoward. And this was his repayment, or to try to turn the attitude of the people around. So he wanted to give this $50,000. And I told you that she decided not to accept that check. Did I tell you that last week? She decided to send it back to him with a note that said, listen, when you're really ready to commit to something, when you really want to make a difference, send the check to that person because it's not doing me any good. It's not doing me any good. And the man received that check back, and I don't know what he did with it immediately, but I can tell you 5 or 6 years later, he had retired from his CEO position, and he had gotten a very lucrative package. He was a very wealthy man, many times over. But that letter coming back to him from Lynn Twist, sending the check back, stuck in his memory. he changed, he began to think about things differently from that day on. Up until that point, he had believed that the only decision we could make in a business had to do with the bottom line and how much profit we would get. And that was his way of operating. But on that day, he started to think about something a little bit differently. And as he retired and he left, that stuck in his mind. And Lynn Twist got a letter from him 5 or 6 years later with a note that told her this information, with a check many times greater than the $50,000 he originally gave from the company. He had changed his mind about things. Because here's the thing. It's important to share. We have money in order to share. And he finally got that. He finally got that. And it stuck with him. And those kinds of things can stick with us for a while. Or we get that new idea and we might not act on it right away. But look what happened to this man. He filled it with the energy of his soul the second time he sent it to her. And realized that money is meant to be shared. That's the truth. Do you believe that? Renee and I have been traveling over the last week, and I had this message in my mind over the last 2 days as we did. We got home yesterday, and I sat down, and I hardly ever watched TV, but I turned it on, and what was on was the Kentucky Derby. It was before the race had started. And just so happened, this is proof that whatever you focus on is what you hear. There was an interview with these two men who grew up together in New York. One man was the owner of the horse Vin Rosso. I don't know, anybody watched the Derby yesterday? A few. So he owned this horse. And this man that he grew up with happened to be in the race industry before he was, but he gave him some pointers and he brought him along. And he taught him the ropes, even though this man had all the wealth and all the money in the wealth aspect, but this man knew how the industry worked, and he brought him along. And what this man said, who brought him along, said, success is best when shared. That like hit me like that. I'm like, oh man, success is best when shared. Then another story, interest story came out. In that same series, when I was watching the Kentucky Derby, the owner of the horse, Bolt d'Oro, this guy named Mick Ruiz, he's a 57-year-old high school dropout. After high school, he worked in the construction industry, and he learned the ropes. He built a multi-million-dollar company installing scaffolding on Navy ships when they renovated them. He had government contracts to install scaffolding. They showed the story of him. All these workers, his workers, he pays some of them over $100,000 a year. He has taco picnics for them. He treats them like family, this man does. And he said the first thing he would do if his horse won the Kentucky Derby was to give $50,000 to a wrestling club that he became aware of. Because, you know why? Because they build character in young boys. You hear that? Do you hear that? Money is meant to be shared. Money is meant to be shared. No matter if you're coming from a high school dropout or a CEO of a company, money is meant to be shared. There was never more evidence to me than those stories that popped out on the TV right in front of me, to remind me and to remind you that that is the purpose of money. Well, there's another idea that I want to explore with you too. So money is meant to be shared, but the question we really need to ask, especially in this series today, is what is possible together? You notice in these stories there was more than one person. There was more than one person that created the wealth, that created the opportunity for others to be successful. So my question to us, and a question I think we need to be asking each other, is what is possible together? What happens when we collaborate? When we collaborate. Lynn Twist says this: implicit in collaboration is the trust that says there is enough and we will figure out how to use it together wisely. You see that? What is possible together is the trust that we will have enough and we will figure out how to use it wisely together. Together. What if we do this thing together and not feel like it has to be on my own? Well, here's another story I read on the airplane back from San Antonio in the Delta magazine, where you wouldn't expect to read anything very inspirational maybe. Maybe about some food, maybe about some architecture. But I read an article as I was sitting there in the plane on the way back, and it was about film and television producer Brian Grazer. Now this man was involved in the movie A Beautiful Mind, Friday Night Lights, which is a TV show. And the interviewer said, well, what stands out for you? What career lessons stand out for you? And the first thing he said was, well, there's no such thing as overnight success. It takes a lot of work. There's no shortcut. Anybody not believe that, right? But he said, the interviewer said, but what helps? What helps? You know, yes, it takes a lot of work. Yes, there's no shortcut, but what helps? And he says this, vision always involves collaboration. Vision always involves collaboration. He says, you never do anything alone. I believe in the power of one to get something started and to sustain a vision, but you have to lock hands with other people to improve it and make it happen. You have to lock hands with other people to improve it and make it happen. You see, this guy does what he calls curiosity conversations. I love this word, these two words together. Curiosity conversations. If he has a project, an idea in mind, he'll go find someone to learn from, to get their ideas about. He wants to listen. He wants to connect with them. He's also writing a book about the power of eye contact, by the way, which I found fascinating. But that's what he does, curiosity conversations. He's saying, you know what? I have this idea, but I'm going to put my ego behind me and I'm going to put myself out there and trust that because I'm connecting with you, we're going to make it so much better than it could be by itself. Yeah, that's what this idea of curiosity conversations is amazing to me. It puts us in that collaboration mode. It puts us in that mode of connection. It puts us in that mode of relying on the strengths of each other, rather than on just me and what I can do by myself. Collaboration, cooperation, curiosity, connection. That's what happens in a you and me world. Scarcity and fear are what happens in a you or me world. You get that? And we can choose which one we want to live in. It's really up to us. And let me bring this down to a really smaller story with the same kind of impact, I think. And it's a story that happened with me at an elementary school just last week. Well, it wasn't last week, a week before last. So I had contractors, and in my other life, I'm a construction administrator, and I work for the school district sometimes doing projects. And I had contractors in Parsley Elementary School over spring break. And they were above the ceiling in the media center doing some work. And don't you know, one of the guys spilled a big cup of coffee on the carpet. Didn't tell anybody. The principal shows up on Monday morning and sends me a picture of the big coffee stain and the media center carpet. Now, Miss Robin Hamilton, I love her to death, but she was not happy about that coffee stain, and she was the least happy that no one had mentioned anything, as was I. And I thought, okay, well, we'll take care of it, we'll do what we can to take care of it. Whatever it takes is what we're going to do. And I told the contractor, I said, have somebody meet me there and we'll figure out what to do. Well, the contractor ignored my request that we meet and sent someone over instead to clean the carpet. And so the guy was there cleaning the carpet, and then he wanted Miss Hamilton to say everything was okay. Well, she refused to say everything was okay and called me and said, well, they were here cleaning it, but I have no idea if it's okay. And a couple days later, after the water had dried on the carpet, she sent me another picture. And you can guess, the stain was still visible. I called the contractor again and I said, listen, meet me over at the school and let's look at this thing together. He got it this time. I asked Miss Hamilton to meet us too, and we're standing around looking at this carpet stain, which by now is kind of faded. You kind of had to stand really like in a certain spot to see it. But it was still there. And we started talking about what we could do to fix the carpet stain. And one person said this, and one person, we had this conversation, we had this collaboration about this coffee stain. And we came up finally with a solution to use some carpet squares. It was a carpet square carpet. They had some extra ones. I was saying, well, maybe we can just replace those two Oh, they'll look brand new. Maybe we scarf someone from over here that aren't as worn, but kind of worn, and then put the new ones over here. Or, yeah, why don't we get the one from under the desk, and let's do this. And then we said, listen, how many do we have? Well, we have 26. Why don't we replace this whole thing here and make it kind of an entrance pad there in the carpet? And that's what we ended up doing. We ended up collaborating and coming up to a solution that we wouldn't have come up with if we hadn't all stood there and listened to each other talk about what the possibilities are. Now, it might seem like a small thing to you, but Miss Hamilton, the person who sent me the pictures and who was unhappy through most of the process, said to me as we were walking out, I'm so glad that you mentioned that we had as many tiles as we had. We never would have come up with this solution unless we had talked it through. She said, I'm happy now. Hey, right? Collaboration. There is a wealth in collaboration. There is a wealth in collaboration in the big things and in the small things. What's possible together? So there's a second side to this idea of collaboration that Lynn talks about in the book, and that is this idea of reciprocity. And that is that anyone or everyone who is engaged in a solution-minded way, in a positive way, brings something to the conversation that we can acknowledge. It may be money, but it may be something else. And here's the thing I want you to know about money. Money is only one resource. You may bring creativity, you may bring organizational skills, you may bring time, you may bring things that nobody thought would possible to bring into the situation. Reciprocity simply says that whatever you bring is as important as what the next person brings. To acknowledge that in collaboration, the other side of the coin, reciprocity. Now that doesn't mean just because you say, well, I'm not the money person, that doesn't mean that you cannot find in yourself a good place to be with giving money. If it's $1, if it's $5, it doesn't mean you leave the money thing all to this person. It doesn't mean you leave the organization all to this person. It doesn't mean you leave all the creativity to this person. It means you acknowledge each other for the gifts that you bring. And that's what real wealth is about. You know, the word wealth is from Middle English. It derives, it means well-being. You know, true prosperity is about well-being. It's about noticing people for what they bring, noticing each other for what we bring into each situation. Making room for possibilities. Yeah? Are you hearing that? That's what it's about. Collaborating and connecting. Having an open heart. Having that for yourself. You know, sometimes we are in a situation where our wealth is not in money. And sometimes we feel less than because of that. Have you ever been there? Where you felt like, wow, you know, this person's bringing this much money and all I have is this. Well, it's time we get over that sort of thing. Because whatever it is we have to give is what we have, and we are wise to acknowledge that that is what we have. And it's important. In fact, it's essential that we have that to offer, and that we make a point of offering it. We need to stop judging ourselves if it's not money we have to give and realize we have inner resources as well as outer resources to give. If everybody just had money to give, who the heck would do the work? You know, Lynn makes that note in her book. She said, we need everyone in collaboration is what makes the world work. I want you to think about your inner resources as well as your outer resources as something that flows, is something that you give, it's something that you offer. And then I want us also to remember to acknowledge that in others. To not let it go by. If you see the person sitting over in the corner knowing that they don't have the money piece of it, to acknowledge what they do have. To acknowledge the amazingness that they are, whatever it is they have to offer, the humor, the creativity, the name something. You know you have all these inner qualities, these inner resources. The ability to Encourage. There is little encouragement in so many areas in the world, especially with regards to our children. What if you can offer encouragement? That is at least as important as any money could be, to have that encouragement. How many lives would be different if we could offer encouragement alone? So recognize your inner resources. Let them flow as you do your outer resources as well. That is true experience of prosperity, the true experience of wealth. There are no haves and have-nots. Let me say that again. There are no haves and have-nots. We are all haves, and our assets are diverse. In the alchemy of collaboration, we become equal partners. We create wholeness and sufficiency for everyone. Let's remember that as we prepare to go into meditation. And sit with these ideas. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And recognize the inner resources and the outer resources. Recognize collaboration and reciprocity as the way the world is enriched. Another deep breath in and out. To know that our wealth is in well-being, that the purpose of money is to share, that the purpose of inner resources as well is the same, to share and enrich the world we live in. Breathing in and breathing out. want to be inspired to new heights. I want my spirit to soar into a new awakening. I want to feel alive and full of wonder, birthing new ideas and dreams. I want to be captured by adventures beyond the realm of my imagination. I pray to become one with the pulse of the universe, rejoicing at the arrival of dawn in my heart. Beloved, may I find this inspiration within me, around me, and in all I touch and all I see. May it brighten my life as I walk step by step into its embrace.